Good evening, everyone. Welcome to American Advocates, episode 45. Coincidentally, the same number when it comes to the presidency that we want back. Number 45, the good old school Trump, as moderator Glenn in chat has already eloquently stated, and I agree with. Episode 45 coming in a little bit later than I wanted it to be, which I see Glenn's also pointing out here. Okay, Mr. Punctual. But that's because so much is developing in the Middle East. There's so many stories to read up on, and I'm kind of doing this on the fly now. I had this whole narrative playing out for today. Of course, I don't mean a propaganda-fueled narrative, but a narrative of, Iran striking the Middle East being imminent. Something that I said would happen actually on last night's episode. I said, President Donald Trump waits until the weekend when the markets are closed to strike Iran. Iran's playing a much different game strategically than what we expected them to play, and so it only seems fair, I guess, if anything's fair in war, but it only seems predictable at this point that Iran, just to spite Trump and America, will strike us during the week in order to influence our markets anyways. And so I had this whole thing planned out from what I had gathered earlier on today. I was going to title this something like Trump threatens to pull U.S. military out of the Middle East as Iran vows to strike Gulf states' oil refineries. But I had to change that because the news has already happened so quickly. It turns out Iran has already executed on their strikes in Qatar and in Saudi Arabia today, both somewhat successfully. And the markets now are volatile as ever. Devastation is already taking place in the Middle East once again, and everything is spiraling out of control. Predictably so, after all, because go figure, this is war. And you can't control anything in war. You can only hedge your bets and hope for the best, which is obviously what this administration was doing, and now is on the receiving end of some of the worst news possible, in all honesty. So the switch up here, what I was going to cover is essentially Iran making these strikes in accordance to what the statements that they've put out there. But now it's already happened. So that's what's going to be on the news for tonight, on tonight's episode 45 of American Advocates. Be sure to subscribe to the channel right now. Turn on post notifications if you haven't already. And like the stream, please. Double tap your phone screen or hit the thumbs up. It truly helps the stream perform well in the algorithm. But the news coming in today that the Iranian regime did in fact follow through on their statements, on the promises that they made when it comes to striking the Middle East, all of their Gulf state neighbors. So what wound up happening, first and foremost, to break it down here, we started off our day really truthfully on Truth Social with President Donald Trump, where he essentially was kind of throwing a fit about our NATO allies, something that I also covered on last night's episode, of course. But he wound up stating this morning at 8:35 a.m. on True Social, "I wonder what would happen if we finished off what's left of the Iranian terror state and let the countries that use it, we don't, be responsible for the so-called strait. That would get some of our non-responsive allies in gear and fast." President DJT. And so Trump was kind of throwing a fit about NATO refusing essentially to send their military to also die for Israel the way that we've been sending our military over there to do so. The death toll currently sits at, I believe, 13 soldiers. News today came in that 2 or 6 of them were actually sent back to America in the caskets wrapped in the American flag. And despite apparent reports of the families requesting unanimously to not have the event of their children's bodies be recorded being sent back to America, pictures nonetheless, I guess, were taken by this Trump administration of President Donald Trump saluting the return of the bodies. So that happened. Trump, of course, is obviously outraged at how embarrassing it looks for the U.S. president to be rejected utterly, literally by every single ally at this point. Except for Britain, which seemed to be on the fence the last time I tuned into British news and saw Prime Minister Keir Starmer. It seemed like Keir Starmer was at least halfway committing to the idea of sending maybe one naval vessel there, which is pretty much all Britain can afford to do anyway, since they've decommissioned their military steadily over the past couple of decades and literally thrown themselves into a weakened military state. So Britain would seem to have been on the fence. Meanwhile, the rest of NATO, predictably, and I'm no NATO lover on this channel here, so when it comes to NATO, obviously they're not going to help us, right? NATO is full of pussies. It's a bunch of pussified countries. But nevertheless, that's the outcome that we're facing now, right? And this is basically NATO now speaking up on behalf of what common sense actually is when it comes to this, which is the common sense, of course, being this is Israel's war. We all know what this war is actually about. The narrative can't be contained anymore. It's actually leaking more and more when it comes to this war. And all the other countries seem to recognize that, except for the United States. And even then, it's really the narrative. They're not controlling it well anymore. Now, of course, we saw Joe Kent yesterday, which was the top story of yesterday's episode here, obviously. We saw Joe Kent, former director of counterterrorism in this country, resign from this administration and just outright say it in his resignation statement. So everyone's kind of getting the bigger picture here now, finally. And it's really not a secret anymore. It's not taboo to say it anymore. The Overton window when it comes to the topic of Israel has shifted so massively over the past couple of years. And really, we're at a point now where it is just this Trump administration that I compare to the John McCain administration and presidency that we thankfully never had. That's what this has turned into. They're the only ones now insisting that this war was necessary, and they're the only ones now running cover for Israel and Israel's goals in that region, which is no secret, especially if you tune into Israeli media, where they openly state what they want, which is regional hegemony and becoming a superpower. And objectively speaking, you can't really blame any country for having that as a goal. That's not actually technically the problem here, though I do understand why so many people are opposed to Israel specifically becoming a superpower and obtaining regional hegemony. When you take a look at how they operate, the more you look into them, the more you realize they are seriously a warmongering country. But objectively speaking, you can never fault a nation for making it a goal to become more powerful, more safe, and secure as a result, and obtaining and becoming a superpower, developing nuclear warheads. You know, if you're a nationalist, that's what you want for your country, certainly. So objectively speaking, it is what it is. But I speak subjectively on behalf of America because I'm an American. And here in America, I don't give a damn about Israel becoming a regional hegemony. I don't give a damn about them becoming a superpower. It doesn't serve my interest as an American for them to do so. And in all honesty, objectively speaking, as a resident of the world's not just superpower, but quite frankly, hyperpower, because that's what we are. There are superpowers in this world, and then there's a hyperpower in this world, which is the United States. It is never wise. It is never wise, strategically speaking, and futuristically speaking, to help any country rise up to the level of becoming a superpower. And Israel is an emerging superpower. It's never wise to do that. Why? Because as the saying goes, friends today, enemies tomorrow. And people just foolishly place their hope and they place all of this ridiculous amounts of faith in Israel. And they just assume that if Israel does become the Middle East superpower, that they will love the United States and return all of this, all of the favors we've done to them for them. They just assume that Israel will benevolently return all of that back to us in kindness and be our friend still. But perhaps I'm just, a paranoid person, but I assume the opposite. I assume that a country that has never experienced such power is more likely to abuse it if they obtain it. And I assume that Israel, if they gain control of the entire Middle East, which is, quite frankly, perhaps the most important region in the world when it comes to trade, or at least one of them, why would Israel do that? We don't see any other example when it comes to the United States being friendly with other allies, like NATO, for instance. NATO, as I've stated on this channel, has been around for 77 years. And even in accordance with what General Eisenhower said about NATO at the time, that's 67 years too long. Eisenhower, the general at the time, said that if NATO lasted longer than 10 years, it should be treated as a failure. And NATO has done nothing but take advantage of our good graces and our kindness towards them. And they've leached off of us and our money in order to obtain what they consider a perfect socialist society, which of course is now many of those countries are crumbling due to immigration policy. But they've built socialist societies and they've relied strictly on our dollars and our defense in order to do so. And then they repay us by not helping us in this war. And I'm totally against this war, so I can't even sit here and really criticize NATO for that stance all that much. But on principle, this is objectively how you should be viewing this. Our kindness as the United States towards foreign countries is almost never rewarded. It's actually almost always strictly taken advantage of. So that's the lens that I view what we're doing with Israel through. I view it through the lens of, will Israel, if they become a superpower, continue to treat us as their greatest ally? Will they do that? In fact, no, they call themselves our greatest ally, I believe, and they view everything through the lens of we owe it to them. You know, when it comes to war, for instance, well, Israel's lives are too precious to fight in war. So it's our soldiers, our young men, our 18 to 26-year-olds who must go there predominantly and shed their blood in order to obtain Israel's goals of regional hegemony. So we already see how they view us truthfully if you're just willing to look at it through the correct perspective. And if you understand their religion, which is something I have broken down on this channel, I've broken down what their Talmud states, I've broken down what rabbinic Judaism is on this channel, then you understand that they view us as the lesser than and the goyim. And we are strictly here to serve their purpose, and then as their religion even states, we can be discarded with after that. So it is not in our interest, to help any country become a superpower. And Israel is not an exception to that rule. But nevertheless, here we are. And it seems like the United States is consistently being run by a bunch of boomer idiots, literal boomer retards, who buy into everything that they were psyoped by, including feminism, globalism, liberalism, sexual liberation, and Judeo-Christian values. Judeo-Christian. Broke down why that's heresy on this channel as well. All a psyop, but boomers are in charge right now of this country, and they worship Israel, not God. I already showed how Ted Cruz said if you say Christ is king, that's anti-Semitic, because Jews don't believe in Christ. It's offensive to them, and the only people who say Christ is king are America First nationalists. You know, America First, the now politically demonized stance here in this country. God forbid Americans want our country to be put first. God forbid want our politicians to run our country from that perspective. How does this benefit the everyday American? If they ran it from that perspective, we wouldn't be in this war right now. So people like Ted Cruz, they despise all of that, right? And so boomers worship Israel over everything, and that's why we're there. And now Trump is finding out very quickly that, well, it turns out most of the world does not feel the same way about Israel that we do. And so NATO universally has declined, with the exception possibly of Britain. They've declined President Trump's request, to send their Navy and possibly some of their soldiers to the Middle East, specifically to the Strait of Hormuz, to help keep it reopened, because Iran has gone completely scorched earth in all of this and is vowing to choke the Strait of Hormuz now for a long time, and they're vowing now to choke the Strait of Hormuz no matter what the United States does. So they've essentially stated even if we now pull out of that region, Iran has stated, we don't give a shit. We're going to keep choking the Strait of Hormuz. We're going scorched earth, and we want everyone to suffer now for your actions, America and Israel. That's essentially what's happening here. Trump recognizes the problem that this is. This could cause quite possibly a global recession if it's not dealt with in a timely manner. And so that's why we saw Trump today on Truth Social at 8:35 in the morning, literally essentially imply that he would think about pulling our U.S. military out of the Middle East, which is just such a ridiculous notion as it is, in all honesty, because what have we done? Well, we've gone in there, we've stirred up a hornet's nest, we struck first, and then we, by striking first, and doing so, quite honestly, from what it seems like to be an unprepared and reckless stance, where it's very clear we were goaded by Israel to strike first. Essentially, Israel lured us over there again. And once we moved over there to defend them, Israel said, well, we're going to strike Iran now, unless you strike them first. We're striking them pretty soon, so you better do something before we do it. And Trump was like, oh, shit, well, if Israel strikes Tehran, they're going to strike back, and that includes us, and that means we get struck first, and we can't have that. So now we have to strike. Marco Rubio admitted this. Speaker Mike Johnson admitted this. Trump has flipped on this before, but in uncertain terms, he's essentially also sort of admitted this. He continually calls this an excursion, and when you look up what the definition of excursion is, it becomes quite clear why we're doing this. And it's not about regime change, Persian liberation. It's not even about China. It's not about oil. Those are all possible icings on the cake, or whatever you may call it. None of them seem likely anyway, though. But it is genuinely about Israel's agenda for the region. And so that's what's happening right now. And then after doing all of that, and after causing nearly 1,300 deaths in Iran, Now Trump says, well, if we don't get help from NATO, we're just going to leave. So it's like, oh, that's nice. We'll strike the region. We'll go to war there in the middle, another Middle East war. That's wonderful. But if NATO doesn't help us in this war that they never asked for, if they don't send help, if they don't send their young soldiers' lives to die for Israel like we're about to do, well, then we're just going to leave. And it's going to be a shitstorm there and everyone else can deal with it. So that's how this morning started, right? And it only rapidly progressed from there. So we saw President Donald Trump, this was a Bloomberg article, U.S. aims to curb soaring oil prices as Iran vows more retaliation. Now, this article was published early this morning, I think. Let me refresh it. Yeah, it was... oh, shit. I shouldn't have done that. I refreshed it, but now it's a different article. Because I pulled it up early this morning. I remember it, though. I read it. So, essentially... President Donald Trump has basically undone this old maritime trade law when it comes to trade. And this is kind of his response to the surging oil markets that we were seeing. And of course, the article that this was from this morning before Iran struck Qatar. And it was talking about how President Donald Trump, I can actually pull that up on OSINT Defender. Let me pull that back up because they explain it well. But essentially, President Donald Trump undid this old maritime law to allow trade to occur at a cheaper rate, essentially, and allow it to occur to try to quell these rising oil future prices, since Iran has vowed to lock down the Strait of Hormuz. Let me find OSINT Defender. Yeah, here it is. Okay, so U.S. President Donald J. Trump has issued a 60-day waiver temporarily suspending the Jones Act, a long-standing shipping law that requires the transport of goods between American ports to be conducted by American-flagged vessels, with the waiver allowing vital resources like oil, natural gas, fertilizer, and coal to flow freely into the United States for 2 months in an attempt by the White House to stabilize oil markets amid the Iran war. And so that happened pretty much right after we saw President Donald Trump on Truth Social threatened to leave the Middle East, right? So we arrive, raise hell, and leave, like Stone Cold Steve Austin, I guess, from the WWF in the 90s. That's kind of, I guess, what Trump was going for here with his messaging on Truth Social. But you can tell, obviously, that that's just a massive bluff, first and foremost. Why? It's because Trump doesn't actually hold all the cards. This is a quote that he used, obviously, with Vladimir Zelensky when it came to the Ukraine-Russia war last year. A statement that he made to him that I agreed with. I despise Ukraine. I think it's idiotic that we send all of this money to help Ukraine when they've done fuck all for us. And I honestly think that Ukraine, I don't care if they get conquered by Russia. It doesn't affect me as an American whatsoever. So I'm against funding Israel, but I'm also against funding Ukraine. I'm against foreign aid in general, right? So Trump looked at Vladimir Zelensky last year and said, you don't hold the cards. And it's true. And Zelensky yet walks around as if he does. The problem is now you fast forward, and that statement can now be applied to President Donald Trump because though we are definitely more powerful than Iran when it comes to our military might, and we're a nuclear power and a superpower, and we have allies, now we've come to find out our allies have no interest in getting involved in this war. And on top of that, Iran is a big country, and Iran is hard to attack. Throughout history, actually, you can read about the history of Iran. It has been relatively impervious to attack due to its mountainous ranges, which makes it easy for them to hide in and hard for them to be invaded, conquered, etc. Even what I've predicted on this channel that I think will come true imminently, boots on the ground, even that could turn out to be a disaster and is probably why this administration is hesitating to put boots on the ground. It's because of the mountainous terrain in Iran. And if you look at maps and in-person photos of the Strait of Hormuz, you can see why that strait is a potential death trap in and of itself. The terrain all plays a part. And that's why Trump doesn't hold the cards, because Iran, they've underestimated it, in my opinion. From what I'm seeing, everything unfold, they've underestimated this. Iran is a massive country, 3 times the size of Iraq, and Iraq wasn't even a country that we were all that effective in. Neither was Afghanistan, for that instance. The Middle East has been an overall nightmare and disaster for us the entire time. And it's all just history on repeat now. And Iran is full of 90 million people, a regime that is 1.1 million strong. And despite the fact that we took out 49 of their most prominent religious leaders and figureheads and generals or whatever you may call them, despite that, we are receiving intelligence reports at this point that are stating essentially that It says right here, this was on a Daily Mail UK article. U.S. intelligence has determined that Iran's regime will likely remain in power despite relentless airstrikes. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps will likely tighten its domestic grip as the country's internal enforcer, intelligence officials told the Washington Post. Israeli Defense Minister Israel Katz said Security Chief Ali Larijani and Gholam Reza Soleimani, commander of Iran's forces, have joined the late Ayatollah Khamenei in the depths of hell after targeted overnight airstrikes. The attack on Larijani comes 4 days after he marched alongside thousands of Iranians at the whatever that day is rally in Tehran, where he taunted Trump during a live interview. That's correct too. He did taunt Trump and basically encouraged Trump to try to come and get him. So it says the U.S. and Israel, Iran Supreme Leader Ayatollah Moshabe Khamenei, the son of Ali Khamenei, unseen since the war began, has made a statement that the U.S. and Israel must be brought to their knees and accept defeat before any peace deal is possible. Now, I've covered this aspect of the war here on this channel before, and I've stated why this war is such a bad idea for the United States to get involved in. I stay true on this channel to the Monroe Doctrine, and I just wish Trump's mentioned it. He even went so far as to say he was reinstating it. The New York Post put out a cutesy newspaper cover at the time calling it the Monroe Doctrine. And this was all centered around when we were taking action in Venezuela. Military action that I approve of, the kind of military action I want to see, that I completely agree with, our Western Hemisphere. Our founding fathers warned against meddling in foreign affairs and going overseas in the pursuit of slaying monsters overseas in foreign lands. They've warned against that. It is unwise for us to be getting involved in this. We don't need to do it. Yet here we are at Israel's behest because big money is playing a massive part in this, and so is the stick that I constantly reference. It's not just the carrot, it's the stick. I reference that on this channel as well. So here we are nevertheless, and the problem is this is a religious holy war being waged by two foreign countries. Israel's a foreign country. Call them our ally if you want. They are a foreign country. And both of these countries are overwhelmingly practicing two different religions, and neither of them are the chosen religion of most American people, the religion that our country was founded on, which is, of course, Christianity, right? We're a Christian nation. Israel's not a Christian nation, and neither is Iran, right? Iran is a Muslim nation, and Israel is a region that practices Judaism. And Judaism doesn't believe in Christ. In fact, they believe in, according to Gittin 57 of their Talmud, they believe Christ is boiling in piss and shit for blaspheming rabbis while he walked the earth. And so this holy war is inappropriate for us to be in, and it can only lead to suffering, chaos, and disaster. That's something I've stated, and I stand by that still. Right now, I actually feel more vindicated for saying that so early on. Now our intelligence is saying, well, Iran, the Revolutionary Guard Corps, the regime, is going to stay intact. Yeah, surprise, surprise. Iran's actually a large country, and it's hard. It's hard to succeed in military conquest there because of their mountainous region, like I said, their mountainous terrain, and because of their religious dedication. These are Muslim zealots we're dealing with here. And when it comes to religious wars, they're fought differently. They're fought with more dedication than a war over resources. And we didn't need to get involved, but here we are. So this is how the morning started. Then an article, of course, came out that was essentially describing how Iran warned that they would start targeting their Gulf neighbors more and hitting critical key resource depots like oil refineries. And this was, of course, a massive prediction that caused oil futures to start getting volatile this morning. And it only got worse throughout the day because it turns out Iran not only attempted to follow through on their promise, but they succeeded. They succeeded in doing so. So the news that's come in now since then has essentially, well, first, by the way, before I even get into that, real quick, I do want to point out something. Israel struck South Pars, which was Iran's largest gas field. And this occurred roughly 12 or 13 hours ago now. So that also took place early on in this morning, about 2 hours after Trump's Truth Social post tweet, where he was threatening to pull out of the Middle East region. We then see Israel take some more action, right? And they struck Iran's largest gas field. And no doubt that plays a part in all of this too, because Israel actually has taken the biggest gamble here. even bigger than Trump, in my opinion, because I've explained this before as well, and I've even showed the polls now that are backing this up. Israel has lost a lot of its support here in the United States, especially with the under 50 crowd, even more so with the under 40 crowd, and even more so with the under 30 crowd, which means in the generations to come, support for Israel will be non-existent. They saw the writing on the wall. They saw the bridge burning here in this country, and they decided, fuck it. We'll burn the bridge down entirely if it means getting America involved one last time to take out our greatest future threat in the Middle East, our greatest hindrance in achieving regional hegemony, our greatest hindrance in building the greater Israel nation, and fulfilling what we believe is our manifest destiny to conquer all lands between the Nile and the Euphrates, that of course being the country of Iran. So Israel is making a sacrifice play, politically speaking, geopolitically speaking, when it comes to us, the United States, the country that they already refer to as their golden handcuffs anyway, right? That's how they view us, because we do kind of at least try to restrict them from being the absolute warmongers that they oftentimes want to be. So they view us as a very beautiful looking, valuable set of handcuffs that assist them, but ultimately restrain them from doing more of what they want. And so this is the gambit on Bibi Netanyahu's part and on Israel's part. The gambit is this will permanently end all goodwill with young and up-and-coming generations in America. But if Iran is knocked out of the way, it'll all be worth it, because then nothing can stop us from slowly taking over all of the Middle East like we want to over the coming decades. This is their gambit. So this must succeed. This must succeed if you're Israel right now. That's how they view this. So Trump, of course, I believe was bluffing on Truth Social, but you got to think there's a little bit of a hair raise. The hair on their arm raises. Israel does. Israel's hair on their arm raises when Trump says, well, we might just pull out of the Middle East altogether if our NATO allies won't help us. One thing leads to another. Israel strikes South Pars, Iran's largest gas field, about 13 hours ago. So that happened at around 10 or 10:30 this morning. And then Iran follows through on its promise and strikes on two separate occasions today, in both cases at least semi-successfully. So the first set that we saw today was, where was that? Saudi Arabia and Riyadh. We have videos out of Saudi Arabia, their capital of Riyadh. Energy sites were struck by Iran, the United Arab Emirates, Qatar as well was the other one. And so Iran is following through, and Iran is playing this war through a different strategy than I think what the Trump administration was prepared for, in all honesty. I think it was very obvious from the start that this administration was not prepared for Iran's scorched earth policy. And President Donald Trump actually, once again, with all of the mixed messaging within this administration, President Donald Trump actually kind of admitted that. And then after the fact, Pete Hegseth basically said, well, the Pentagon did think that this was possible. We just thought it was unlikely that Iran would go scorched earth and strike all of their neighbors to infuriate them and stir up the Middle East region even more. And what this is doing now is it's putting even more global economic pressure on all of these countries, and it's actually going to ultimately wind up sucking more countries into this war, and possibly, I hate to say it, because I hate the fear-mongering and I hate the clichédness of it, but if Iran is somewhat successful even at stirring up more of an economic war now by targeting these energy depots, these various energy depots, and putting the world into a global recession, more and more countries are going to get involved, and more countries are going to show radically different interests in the region, and it's going to be different reasons for why they're involved. That's World War III, and it is potentially on the table, in my opinion. I didn't say that last year when we struck Iran. I knew we were going to get in and out last year, and I thought it was cliche and tacky that people were like, oh my God, it's World War III, this is it. This is different. Iran is responding way differently, and they're actually objectively playing the game a little bit smarter than they were last year, where they gave us a courtesy call. It was all just about appearance, etc. So it is different this time, and we see that with Ras Laffan, which was in Qatar, a refinery that was attacked by Iranian missiles. I believe 2 of the missiles were successful in these strikes. And it says in this article here, express.uk, Ras Laffan oil refinery in Qatar has reportedly been attacked by in an Iranian missile strike. Emergency response teams were deployed immediately to contain the resulting fires, as extensive damage has been caused. Qatar Energy wrote on social media. All staff members are accounted for, and there are no current casualties. Ras Laffan is home to a refinery that Iranian state media had earlier said was a target and should be evacuated. The oil refinery is one of the world's largest leading LNG production sites. That's natural gas. And it's coming under focus after Iran issued threats of retaliation. So this is the example here that comes into play when I say Trump doesn't hold all of the cards, because he truthfully doesn't. And this is why war is such a gamble and such a roll of the dice. Trump went in, and if you bought into the 5D chess and you're a plan truster and you're a MAGA cultist at this point, and I say this as someone who voted for Trump and is and will always be a social and fiscal conservative, mind you. But if you're one of those idiotic fucking plan trusters and you get your information from QAnon and you believe that Trump is a 5D chess grandmaster who had all of this figured out months ago and it's all going perfectly according to plan, well, this goes to show you that it's not, okay? This was not part of the plan. This administration is woefully unprepared for how Iran has decided to go scorched earth in this war and how they've decided to attack their neighbors, which Iran has tried at least to remain somewhat friendly with recently. This is all unaccounted for, and this is all showing a lack of preparation. Quite the contrary to the 5D chess Trump player insisters out there who swear that Trump is in complete control, this is America first, etc. This is what this shows. And there's nothing that we can do to stop this, and it's why Trump doesn't hold all of the cards, because Iran is nowhere near as powerful as America, sure. But Iran is big enough to actually put up a big enough of a fight to where we can't just go in and squash them immediately, and we certainly really can't control the outcome. If you had listened to Trump early on, you would have believed that this will be a 4 to 5 week war, and there's still a chance that that's all that it is, and I pray to God that's what it all is, but it looks like it's going to drag on much longer at this point. But if you listen to Trump, you believe this is just a 4-week excursion, not a war, it's not a war. Oh, don't say that, don't say it's a war. Trump will get impeached if it's a war because he didn't get congressional approval, so it's an excursion, it's a conflict, right? You get into an accident in traffic and the cop comes up and says, what happened? You go, well, officer, I got into a little bit of a traffic conflict today. Just a little bit. It's been imminent, though, for all 47 years that I've been driving. It was an imminent traffic conflict, and it finally happened. And I don't know what else to say, officer. Well, it looks like an accident to me. Don't say accident, then I have to get a ticket and go to... No, my insurance will go up. It's a traffic conflict, okay? So that's what people buy into, sadly. But we'll call it an excursion because that's what Trump told you it is. And a lot of idiotic fucking MAGA idiots out there believe that. So it's an excursion. It's a 4-week excursion, no more, no less. We'll be in and out. And we'll completely obliterate the Iranian regime. A new, more easy to work with regime will rise up. The Persians will be liberated. The Iranians will take their country back. It'll be like paradise. Western values will be ushered in. We'll establish a golden shining beacon of Western democracy in Iran. They'll prosper once again. We'll see all of the lewd photos online again of the Persian women in bikinis. We're gonna liberalize them and turn them into the whores they deserve to be. They don't deserve to be wearing their burqas. Their country doesn't want that. They're not embracing that level of conservatism. They want to be fucking whores like the American women over here. So we're going to go fucking liberate them and introduce some good old-fashioned Western liberal values and encourage them to get on OnlyFans and sell sex and wear bikinis on the beach like we see photos of them doing from the 1960s and 70s before they were reconquered. That's what it's all about. Don't you understand? That's what it's really all about. They want a touch of that Western degeneracy over there. And you're a selfish bastard if you're trying to say that this isn't America first and that you don't care about the Iranian people being free. So you would have bought into that, and you would have bought into this whole, we're going to be in and out. It'll be quick. We know what we're doing. These strikes were effective, and the regime is destroyed. And that's it. And now we're going to set the terms. Well, it turns out it's all been the opposite. The regime's not destroyed. Our intelligence is now continually reporting that the regime is not destroyed. The regime is still active, and we're seeing that very clearly as now Qatar, Ras Laffan in Qatar, and what was the other city? Excuse me, what was that city again? Yeah, Riyadh, the capital of Saudi Arabia, were struck today effectively by the Iranian regime. 6 oil tankers that listened to President Donald Trump, who encouraged them to stop being gutless cowards, he said. Stop being so gutless. Find some guts and sail through the Strait of Hormuz anyway. It's open, he says. Well, 6 oil tankers listened to that advice, and they were all prominently blown to hell. One of them was photographed smoldering in the Strait of Hormuz, floating there with a massive black hole on the side of it, smoldering with embers as it was blown to bits by Iranian drones. And that's really the problem here, by the way. Not just the tactical and strategical advantage of Iran being so mountainous with unforgiving terrain, filled with infidels, Iranian regime infidels who are religious zealots for Islam and will give their life willingly and die for what they believe is a holy war. Not only is that a massive problem, and always has been when it comes to the Middle East, mind you, but the Strait of Hormuz is a problem that you would assume that the Trump administration would have looked back on historically and understood this is the first and foremost play of Iran to choke the Strait of Hormuz as punishment for trying to wage war with them. They've literally done it before. But it almost seems, forgive me for saying this, I hate to think they're this dumb, but it does almost seem like this administration, I don't think that they thought that this wouldn't happen, but I think they were naive in thinking that they could stop it from happening or get it under control quickly. And now that's being shown to be incorrect as well. We're now reportedly sending even more Marines over there, possible future boots on the ground scenario once again. More Marines now are being discussed. It's being discussed to send more of them there. We already have, I believe, 2,500 of them sailing on their way there, or probably have already arrived, because again, with the Strait of Hormuz and the mountainous terrain of Iran, it's hard to keep it open and to defend it from both sides. So you actually are probably in a situation at that point, if you have to do that, especially if NATO won't help you, where you will be in a situation where boots on the ground might have to be deployed on the sides of the Strait of Hormuz to protect the banks, because it's hard to see what's happening. So that's first and foremost. Secondly, one of the big problems that I've discussed on this channel as well ties back in with what I've already stated, the mountainous terrain. Well, the mountains, the Iranians have buried a lot of their production facilities under those mountains. They act as natural shields for our missile strikes. And what they do is they've buried drone production facilities and ballistic missile production facilities under their mountains. And these are cheap to produce, mind you. Ballistic missiles are way cheaper to produce than Israel Iron Dome interceptors are. And so that's Iran's strategy, is it's just the cheese strategy. If 88 out of every 100 missiles are stopped by the Iron Dome, Iran figures, well, we'll just produce thousands of them then, and we'll launch them all continuously. If 12 out of every 100 make it through, 120 out of every 1,000 make it through, 1,200 out of every 10,000 make it through, etc. And the ballistic missiles are infinitely cheaper than the Iron Dome interceptors are. So that's also a problem. The drones are also cheap too. We're talking in some cases drones that cost $600 from what I've seen. So Iran has leaned heavily on cheap but yet effective defensive strategies. And it is tough to defend against this. It's always tough to attack a defender in their homeland. That's first and foremost. But this is why Trump doesn't hold all of the cards. We're trying to fight a war. We're trying to fight on behalf of two nations engaged in a holy war in their lands against zealots who have been preparing for this moment. Iran has been preparing for this moment. They've clearly had this plan in place, and now they're executing it at our expense and, quite honestly, at our detriment. I know the chat's been going nuts, so I'll take a look at it before I continue on here, because I do want to discuss a little bit more when it comes to the economy. We have some economic reports that have come in both domestically here, as well as I want to discuss oil futures and how they've risen. And then I also want to discuss Tulsi Gabbard, because this is news that a lot of people missed today. But Tulsi Gabbard, our Director of National Intelligence, went before a Senate hearing today where she was grilled. And she said some revealing things. She was way better about it than like Kristi Noem was when it came to covering for President Trump. But the line of questioning she was asked was very revealing, and it forced her to reveal a couple of things about our intelligence reports. And then if you're a critical thinker like I am, because I'm literally the smartest YouTuber on YouTube, nobody thinks the way I do. Nobody talks about this the way I do, which is why you should subscribe right now to American Advocates and like the stream, because it truly helps the stream perform well in the algorithm. But if you look at it from a critical perspective, what was said today by Tulsi Gabbard, then you'll understand that we do have a serious issue on our hands. And then you'll wind up saying basically that guy on American Advocates, that super good looking YouTube streamer who's a Republican but gets accused by MAGA of being a Trump hater with TDS. Turns out he was right. This really does seem to be Iraq 2003 2.0. Stop everything. Super chat coming in. Once again, Beck fan paying his tariff, which is what everyone in this chat should be doing. Everyone should be paying their tariffs. All of you owe me tariffs, at least $2. Beck fan covering for a couple of you deadbeat scumbags with a $5 tariff. And he says, my personal assessment on Iran's war likely outcomes: disaster 25%, draw 50%, moderate success 10%, total victory 15%. Interesting. The draw being 50%, I understand where you're coming from on that, and I think that's the more likely outcome for sure as well. But draw, in all honesty, in this case, I don't think a draw is completely possible. I genuinely believe a draw means by default an Iran victory. Because if the regime's not completely destroyed and we consider it a draw, well, they win because we ultimately pull out and we look weak. So, but I understand where you're coming from on that. I think that's somewhat accurate. I just don't think a draw, or stalemate for that matter, is actually on the table here. And you have to remember the Israel factor here. Israel will not tolerate a stalemate. Israel wants success. Israel demands success. So you have to put that in the equation as well. And I think by default, if you look at it that way, that ups the percentage chance of disaster, in all honesty. So, all right, let's see what you guys are saying in the chat before I move on to covering the more economic report today, the oil futures, some more articles I wanted to discuss as well. We'll get into all of that in a second. I know the chat's been going off. I see some familiar people in here. Eddie, bold as a lion, I think I saw. Sweet Chili, I think Sweet Chili was in here before. He's saying a lot. Oh yeah, I think Sweet Chili is the Iranian defender idiot, but we'll take a look. Man, a lot of shit talking. Hey, Sick from the Kush, welcome back. Glad to see you back in my chat. Wow, what's been going on here? I've missed a lot of chat here. Carl says we will take it over. We'll see. That'll get very expensive and costly. Taking over the Strait of Hormuz would be very costly and unnecessary. We just didn't need to be there. That's what's so frustrating about all of this, is just how unnecessary it is. Because you're not wrong. Like, that might have to be our goal. But that's going to be so costly and unnecessary, both in blood and treasure. Nothing new when it comes to the Middle East. It's just a death trap. It's such a useless region to America. We just don't belong there in any capacity. Mohammed says Israel first. Absolutely not. This is America first. America first, and truthfully, it's America only on this channel. Scott Truth says, what is the first commandment? What does that have to do with anything? Jesus answered him, the first of all the commandments is, Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. What? Okay. That's not really the first. Okay. What's cooking, Juice? Yeah. Very, very funny, Calendarman. The internet is the throne of Satan. No, that's not. The internet's not the throne of Satan. That's the world, perhaps, but not the internet itself. One world governs, says Carl. It's increasingly looking that way, but it doesn't have to be. And I don't think that's accurate in totality. We're not completely one world governed just yet. Calendar Men, please leave. No one wanted you to begin with, Orange Men. Bold as a Lion says, it's so insane. Oh, Glenn says, makes me more mad that politicians campaigning using the fallen her children. Yeah, my mother is MAGA, and I sent it to her. She denied it, and she has a dead son. Yeah. Hey, Bold as a Lion, your mom's probably a boomer. It's so hard to deal with the boomers. They're psyoped. They believe what they're going to believe, and there's really nothing you can do about it, man. You really cannot convince boomers to believe it. I approached this old Catholic guy at my gym the other day, and I figured, he's Catholic. He's not Protestant, right? He was raised Catholic. It's different, right? Catholics are just different. They're a different animal when it comes to Jews and Israel. So I approached him, and he was like, oh, no, I admire Israel. They've really done such a good job defending themselves. I mean, they're just so resilient and just persistent and just so strong and inspirational. It's like, I want to throw up in my mouth, you know. Then you tell him, like, well, what about pre 1948? And he's like, what's that? It's like, well, that's when we gave them their nation. So what were they before then? You know, there's no answer for that, by the way. But yeah, you can't do anything with it. It just doesn't matter. It's the young generations that will change, that are going to change the world on that perspective. But with the elderly people, man, they've been psyoped into believing so much shit when it comes to feminism, globalism, liberalism, sexual liberation, etc. Israel as well. There's nothing you can do. You just got to let them live in their delusion. And I know it's your mom, so I hate to get morbid, but I say it even in regards to sometimes my parents who are, they're more receptive of it. But I'll tell my mom all of this stuff too, and she'll agree. But then she'll be like, "Well, I still support Israel, though." So you just gotta wait. They'll hit the deceased line one day. Sadly, it's our parents. Obviously, I don't want that to happen, but that'll happen, and then the world will be different, and that's the truth. Boots on the ground. No, I agree, Ben. Ben Shapiro had a dumbass article titled "Media Hopes MAGA is Fracturing." Not even close. Make no mistake, Trump is still very much in control of MAGA. Well, and I guess that's true. MAGA's not fracturing because MAGA already fractured. MAGA already split, and there's a new MAGA now that is unrecognizable. That's actually the reality of it. America First is a larger movement that has basically split from MAGA. All right, there's too many chats. I'm not even going to bother catching up. You guys are goy. I mean, honestly, it's not really worth catching up on anyway. I'm sure nobody's saying anything all that anyway. Sick from Kush said we had percussive traffic. Trying to see what Sick from Kush said. I think he's talking to Ben there about stop crying, shut up and learn. Hope everyone's good, though. Yep, for sure. Cemetery says so much AI crap out there anymore. Yeah, that's true. AI slop. I've been watching the Benjamin Netanyahu AI stuff, too. Or at least what people are saying is AI. I believe it's been verified now that at least one of those videos was real, but it does look kind of weird. And it really does highlight a problem with AI. If those videos are real, it's like, well, that's a problem with AI. Then people already don't believe they're real because they know AI exists. Bold as a line. Okay, yeah, you guys are just more chatting with each other, so I'm going to skip all your chats. It's not really, it is what it is. I will support and post what I like. If you don't like it, that's your problem, says Sweet Chili. What's going on? Yeah, Sweet Chili's pro-Iran here. I mean, I don't care, Glenn. I don't care if he's pro-Iran. We're not pro-Iran here, obviously. We're not pro-Israel. We're not pro-Iran. We're pro-America. But if he wants to be in the chat, I don't care. I literally don't care. That is, freedom of speech to some degree. In this chat, we remain free speech absolutists. So, now as an American nationalist, do I believe somebody like him belongs in our country? No. If I became president, I would find out who Sweet Chili 2026 was, and I would have him deported because there is free speech, but then there's also advocating for enemies to our country. Those who advocate for enemies to our country should be deported and permanently banned from re-entering. So that's different. But in this chat, let him be an Iran supporting asshole. I don't care. That's fine by me. All right, let's get back on track here. Charles Platt asks, what's your opinion on the Patriot Front? I don't know what that is, and I'm not sure. I don't know if that's on topic with what I'm talking about here. Hey, 2009 lifeguard. I see lifeguards in here. I see Cole Ferguson's in here. Cole Ferguson, my number one liberal supporter, who literally said that he loves me, even though I'm a far right Republican. And now he followed me on X. He's one of the few fuckers that actually follows me on X from here, which I actually appreciate. And he likes all my stuff. A liberal that I don't agree with at all likes all my stuff now. What weird times we're living in. Welcome, though, Cole Ferguson. Every Ben Shapiro article is stupid. And see, I hate being in this position. I should see Cole Ferguson in my chat right now, and I should say, fuck you, Trump is awesome, I'm glad I voted for him, MAGA rules, make America great again, American nationalism, Christianity, blah, 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 it's all wonderful, but I can't do that. And I actually have to side with Cole Ferguson, a liberal, and I have to say, yes, I agree. Ben Shapiro is super fucking stupid. I can't stand him. He's hideous, his eyebrows are gross, and he's a moron. And his articles are dumb. And that's where we're at right now, unfortunately, in our American political landscape. Sweet Chili needs to go immediately, says Lifeguard. If he's going to spam Iran constantly, though, Sweet Chili, that's spam. That is different. So there's a difference. You want to say smart stuff in my chat? Go for it. But if all I see is just you saying Iran with the Iranian flags, that's spam. You're deported and you won't belong here. So that's your warning. We agree on more than you think, says Cole Ferguson. I don't know about that, Cole Ferguson. We'll see. We'll see on how much we agree with. But I appreciate you being here nonetheless. You have now been warned officially. Let's fucking go. Yeah, no spam. That's different, Sweet Chili. No spamming. But you're free to say what you're free to take a side. That's fine. Speak your piece. Advocate for Iran if you want. Just don't spam it. Okay. Yes, Iran. Stop. Yeah, stop crying. Yeah. No spam. That's the whole lot. That's the whole point here. If you keep spamming the same exact chat over and over again, you will be deported. So watch it. All right, let's get back on track here. I wanted to cover a little bit more here. I'll dive back into it, citing this article right here, of course, which was the Gulf states battle to shoot down the Iranian missiles as Tehran blitzes oil and gas plants, causing extensive damage to the world's biggest in Qatar, sending the price of crude soaring. So we saw Trump essentially try to implement this strategy by what did they say it was? The OSIT defender. Trump issued a 60-day waiver suspending the Jones Act. It's a shipping law, of course. So Trump is trying to combat the rising oil costs, the oil future prices, the volatile oil futures market, the oil costs, etc. He's done a few things to try to combat that. Strategically striking the Middle East more so on the weekend when the markets are kind of closed down, so it can't really affect the markets as much. And I made this prediction on this channel yesterday, and I stated, I wouldn't be surprised if Iran starts striking in the middle of the week, because it's an economic war that they want to wage against us. Iran can't fight a full-on war against us, military to military. We will crush them over time. No country can stand up to us in that regard. But what they're doing is they're waging this war as smart as possible, and by targeting the economy and by striking their neighbors, which this administration, like I said, I don't think predicted. They're applying diplomatic and economic pressure on Donald Trump, and that's a whole different animal for President Donald Trump to deal with. So Trump tried to combat it, but then, of course, Iran succeeded, like I said, and they struck Saudi Arabia today and Qatar, successfully so, and we saw oil futures spike, right? Oil futures were up 5% yesterday, and today they're up another 3.5%. And Brent oil was up, it was Brent oil, I think that was up 5% yesterday. It's up 4% more today. Brent crude oil futures are now at $111.75. Meanwhile, oil futures, regular oil futures, when you Google it, $98.93. So people are now predicting $115 a barrel, $120 a barrel. People are starting to now spread the rhetoric, which I think is possible, of course, unfortunately, $200 a barrel. It's silly to say it, but it actually could be a reality depending on how long this war is drawn out. And this really is the problem, again, with this war. Trump gave us a timeline, but there's no way to enforce that time. Timelines in war are foolish. But the problem is Trump doesn't want to call this a war. He doesn't want to believe this is a war. So he wants to believe he can put a timeline on his excursion, right? And Iran is proving that that's going to be ineffective, and Iran is proving that they can draw this out much longer. I also discussed a long time ago, 2 weeks ago, I'd say at this point, early on when this war was starting, that the standard for Iran winning, and the idiotic cattle in my chat, not all of you, but there are idiotic cattle that come in my chat, you stupid goy swine cattle idiots in my chat. I had a guy push back on this. What an idiot he was when I said Iran, our way of declaring victory in this country, the standard for what a U.S. victory looks like in Iran is so much higher than the standard for what an Iranian regime victory is in Iran, right? And I literally stated that. For us to achieve victory, we need regime change. We need a weakened Iran. We need to prove they had nuclear warheads that we did, in fact, take out. Persian liberation would help because they insisted that that played a part in this. There's so much that we went into Iran claiming it was about. Our standard for victory is so high, right? And now the Strait of Hormuz is playing a part. Meanwhile, the standard of victory for the Iranian regime is literally just survival. And I had some smooth-brained chud in my chat when I said that say, you call hiding a victory? Yes. And do you know why? Because that's what we've seen already in the Middle East. That's all it took. in 2003, 2004, 2005, all the way up through until the Middle East War was first ended, the original one from '01 and '03, all it did take, in fact, was for radical Islamist, extremist jihadists to get the idea that we just need to hide. America can't stay here forever. It's inhospitable. It's not compatible to the West. It's expensive, etc. And America doesn't want to occupy us forever. We'll just hide. And we'll continue to pester them and attack them and kill some of their soldiers to try to encourage them to leave sooner. And people will lose some of our forces doing so. But the leaders will hide, right? The holy war can be waged some other day. All it takes is for them to hide, and they achieve success and victory. That is what it takes. If we can't find them, and if we can't cut off all the heads of what I would call the Hydra snake, well, the Hydra just grows back. This is the inherent problem with the Middle East. It's a cursed region, and it's doomed, especially if you believe in the Bible. It is doomed and cursed to be forever in war. And, scary enough, the only time it's promised to be peaceful is in the end of times. So I view it as useless and a senseless war for a lot of different reasons, that being one of them. And that is the standard of victory for Iran. People, I had a chud, like I said, disagree with that, but it's like, you just don't understand. You just don't get it. If you think forcing Iranian regime leaders into hiding is victory, you're sadly mistaken. And the problem with that is, of course, that would be thrown back in my face because Trump will declare victory and the MAGA cultists would eat it up. See, he's playing 5D chess and they're nowhere to be found. I bet you Mojtaba Khamenei's dead. He might not even be alive. I bet you he's dead. The Iranian regime has been wiped out. Nobody's heard from them. And so sadly, in the short term, it looks like I'm wrong. But if that does occur that way, I guarantee you within a year, 2, 3, 4, 5 years, they're back. They're back. They take over the region. That's literally what's happened in the Middle East when we tried regime change. In fact, in Iran, we already tried regime change in Iran in the 1950s. And within one generation, it was reconquered. So it's just simply history. It's just simply knowing your history. It's just simply paying attention. And it's literally just simply critical thinking and logic. That's what it is. This is ingrained in their culture, this religion. And so we spend all of this time and money and blood and treasure setting up a potential future shining beacon of democracy in the Middle East. And we train soldiers to defend against possible Islamic extremist attacks after we leave. We spend considerable money and time training their soldiers, and we help them set up a democracy. They go through an election. They elect a leader. They have a military that's somewhat trained. Their people are starting to do well and feel optimistic. And we say, okay, well, we've been here for almost 2 decades or actually 2 decades. It's time for us to leave, but it looks like you guys got it, right? And so we leave. And what happens? They don't even last a year. They surrender. They're soldiers that we train to fight. They surrender. They go, oh, we surrender. Please don't kill us. They do kill them, of course. They behead them. And then they take over again. Boom. This is how this works. This is why this is so fucking stupid. So none of this can be controlled is the bottom line here. And it's just going to spiral out of control. Trump can't control it. The country's too big. And we're really seeing all of the devastating impacts of this now. And it's only going to ramp up even more. Economic reports were coming in. The consumer index is becoming more poor. Inflation is now heating up. The GDP growth was terrible for last quarter of last year. It was way below. It was way below what it should be. It was way below what Trump said it would be, right? Oil futures are high, volatile. Cost of living rose again year over year. If I saw correctly, I have the article pulled up here. Wholesale prices rose 0.7% in February, much more than expected, and we're up 3.4% annually, right? The producer price index, a measure of pipeline costs that producers receive for their products, increased seasonally, adjusted 0.7% on the month. The core PPI was up 0.5%. On a 12-month basis, inflation was at 3.4%, the most since February of 2025, while core was at 3.9%, according to the BLS. Food prices rose 2.4%, while energy was up 2.3%. Within food, the index for fresh and dry vegetables soared 48.9%. Now, your eyes are not lying to you, and this is something I've been saying on this channel now for 2 fucking months pretty much at this point. I've literally said I've gone into my grocery store, the prices are going up. I said this before the Iran war. What do you think an Iran war is going to do to those prices? Well, oil's becoming a problem now. The Strait of Hormuz is being choked. The Iranian regime has vowed to keep it choked no matter what the U.S. decides to do. If we pull out of the region, they have vowed to choke it regardless. They want us to suffer for striking them. And so with oil being now halted at the Strait of Hormuz, the tankers don't want to pass through. The 6 tankers that listened to Trump saying that it's open tried to pass through and were blown to bits. As a result of the tankers just sitting there, now the oil production has come to a halt because they've already produced enough that's now sitting there on the docks, not being picked up by the tankers anymore, since the tankers are just floating there. All of this is coming to a halt. Gas prices are going up, and when oil goes up and gas prices go up, the cost of transportation goes up. And when that happens, of course, our cost of living increases. So this is not America first, it is truthfully America last. And the only country benefiting from this is, in fact, Israel. And that's not even a guarantee because of how unsuccessful this is turning out so far. This has been straight folly. Says stock market futures slipped following the report while treasury yields were higher. Futures traders pushed out the next Fed interest rate cut until at least December. That was more news that we had from Jerome Powell today. Of course, he's finishing up his term, finally, as the head chair of the Federal Reserve. But he did announce today that because of this Iran war, he cannot issue more rate cuts. Surprise, surprise. Jerome Powell doesn't want to cut the rates anymore. He never really wanted to, but now this is the perfect excuse to. And truthfully, it's actually a justified reason not to. Now we have Trump's dove being set to take that chair in May. But even when he gets in, even a absolute Trump sycophant, truthfully, logically, will not be able to cut the interest rates at all if we're still involved in this war either. It doesn't make sense to. It would be devastating for us it would be a massive risk to do so. Of course, the Reserve is targeting inflation to be at 2%, and we haven't achieved that at all so far under this Trump administration yet. Trump got it down to a point where it was cooled, and it was at an okay rate, especially compared to what we saw under Biden, but it's not been at a 2% rate. It's been higher the entire time. Yeah, and it says the report comes with inflation worries accelerating amid the fighting in the Middle East. The U.S. and Israel continue to strike at targets in Iran, causing energy prices to surge. Oil has been trading around $100 a barrel. Now we know, of course, it's over that. Brent crude hitting 111, up more than 70% year to date as the conflict has proceeded. So, to make matters worse, we now have, of course, Kevin Hassett. I talked about this yesterday. I'm actually going to play this clip because I was doing a little bit of screen share yesterday. I'm not doing that today, so I can't show it on screen, but I'm going to play the audio of it. Our economy is not doing better because of this war. It already was kind of struggling as it is, and it wasn't improving nearly as much as you would expect it to improve under a conservative president. And a general rule of thumb when it comes to each individual president's economy is you really don't start to even feel the effects of a president's actions until about 18 to 24 months in. So we're still actually not at that point yet. But the ultimate bottom line here is now in this war, this is a war that is going to likely be dragged out. It's going to get even worse. And the even worse part about that is Kevin Hassett, right? This is Kevin Hassett. This is one of Trump's economic guys in his administration. Well, Kevin Hassett had this to say when it comes to what he believes will be the effects of our economy when it comes to the Iran war. He says, well, it shouldn't be that much of a problem or that harmful to America. That's what he initially says. But then he even goes on to state, well, the American consumer actually would be harmed by it. So he does admit it. Then you got to listen to how he follows up that statement. Take a listen.
The U.S. economy is fundamentally sound, and that if it were to be extended, it wouldn't really disrupt the U.S. economy very much at all. It would hurt consumers, and we'd have to think about, if that continued, what we would have to do about that. But that's like really the last of our concerns right now, because we're very confident that this thing is going ahead of schedule. The U.S. economy is
It's the last of our concerns. And so again, who's this benefiting? Well, it's not the American people. It's certainly not an America First agenda that's being played out right now. Trump doesn't care about you, clearly. And they just openly say it now. Kevin Hassett says, well, that's the last of our priorities. American consumers being hurt by an Iran war? That's the last of our priorities. That's the last of our concern. We're not even thinking about that, really. And why would you, I guess? This is all about Bibi Netanyahu and regional hegemony for Israel. You stupid fucking goyim, go to fucking work and make sure to pay your taxes so that you can fund this war for another country to obtain regional hegemony and become a superpower. Israel deserves it. You deserve fucking nothing, though. You cattle, you fucking cows. You're bred to work and to be a slave in your own country. That's really the messaging there. And I don't know how anybody denies that at this point. They just say it now. And again, Judaism believes that about the Goyim and the Gentiles, right? So it's all just, that's just what it is. So our economy's not getting better, and it's not going to get better. Okay, that's what I'm really here to say. It's not going to get better, especially if we stay involved in this war and it becomes prolonged and it doesn't end in 4 weeks, which is just increasingly looking like it won't be likely. Unless, of course, Trump actually does what he says he what was thinking about doing, which I've started off this stream saying I thought was a bluff on True Social, and we just, I don't know, we just pull out of the region and let NATO deal with it, which, by the way, that's not great diplomatically speaking. That's a great way to ensure that your allies hate you even more. Stir up a hornet's nest, piss off a religious, zealous kind of a group in the form of the Iranian regime, create dire global recession-like consequences for all countries, whether they wanted to be involved or not, and then basically say, well, since you won't help us in this war that we literally started, we're fucking out. You can deal with it now. What kind of fucking foreign policy is that? So it's all just a bunch of nonsense. But I want to move on to the other story I wanted to discuss today. It's actually going to be a couple of things centered around our intelligence. Our intelligence reports. Tulsi Gabbard, you might have missed it because of all the excitement happening in the Middle East when it came to the strikes from Iran on Qatar and in Saudi Arabia. But Tulsi Gabbard, our director of national intelligence, had to go before a Senate hearing today where she was grilled with a line of questioning that she did her best to answer from a politically safe standpoint. She certainly handled it better than Kristi Noem or Pam Bondi did, but her answer is still very revealing, and we're going to go over that. But stop everything, my God! A tariff has come in, a tariff payment from Glenn, my moderator of all people. Thank you so much for that tariff, Glenn. He says that comment of cost of living for Americans is the least of concern is infuriating and needs to be confronted by Americans and voters. Makes me mad. Yeah, well, and here's how you handle that, by the way. You handle that by following the advice that I've been giving out on this channel, which is, of course, you don't owe these people your vote. And I posted on my X today, which is why you should follow me on there. I went live to test the reach for live on X. For me, it was terrible, but my X is not big either. And so it just got saved as a video. But it got saved as a video where I raised the question, essentially, if you're a white American young man in America, why would you vote Republican at this point? You should go check out that video on my X page, at American_advo, A-D-V-O. And the bottom line is, I can't come up with anything. Genuinely. I can't come up with anything. I can't come up with a reason why I myself would vote Republican at this point. Stop everything. Hey, sick from the kush. You're new here and you're already paying a tariff, though it's in Canadian dollars. So I'm not going to be deceived here entirely. Canadian $5 is nowadays more like what, $3.90 or $4 or something like that, $4.10 maybe. Still good. I appreciate that. A tariff on here I consider a worthy tariff of $2 or more. So you've paid more than double your fare, and I appreciate it. He says, good show, not even American. I can see that, you're Canadian. But that's cool, man, sick from Kush. That's awesome, man. I appreciate that. I really do. Actually, I kind of like when people from other countries come in because it does lend a different perspective on our politics. And lately, of course, because of everything that we're dealing with in the Middle East right now, I actually value that perspective. Of course, we playfully rag on Canadians here, but believe it or not, I've actually been up to Canada a couple of times, and it's a great place. I've been up there for Niagara Falls. I went to Clifton Hill, and I a long time ago, I actually went up there to see a girl. Of course, that wasn't going to work out when I found out, oh, you don't want to live in Florida with me? She's like, no, I'm Canadian. I don't want to move to America. It's like, oh, okay, well, I guess this can't continue then. But yeah, I went to Clifton Hill, beautiful area. You guys have the much better side of Niagara Falls, in all honesty, just to be real. The New York side of Niagara Falls is just not that good. And New York is such a shitty state. They don't even really take care of Niagara Falls up there. It's more like, I don't know, it's kind of shit, to be honest with you. But Canada actually does a much better job of turning it into like a tourist attraction. So yeah, and I think I was up in Canada one other time when I was little, but I don't remember what for. I think it was for some like play, like an African. I think it was like the Lion King Live or something, and it was maybe in Toronto or something like that. I was real little then though, so I don't exactly remember. But I appreciate the tariff. Thank you so much, Sick from the Kush. You're welcome here anytime, like I said. And I feel bad that you felt like I was chewing you out last night about the boomer stuff. I wasn't. I'm just very passionate about that topic. Uh, Censored Sergeant, do you really think Iranians in Iran are celebrating in the streets? There's reports, bold as a lion, that they are kind of backing their regime, actually. I've seen intelligence reports from our own intelligence agencies saying that that's a thing. So, John Boy says I'm done voting. Yeah, let me get back on point with that. Actually, hold on, stop everything before I get back on point with that. Another tariff has come in from bold as a lion. Oh, he says nothing. He just paid $5 like a Chad. He doesn't even want me to read a comment out loud for him. So, he said nothing. And then look at this. I see Cole Ferguson says Jerome Powell is solid. And then he's like, we agree on much more than you think, pal. Well, then you go and say something like that. And it's like, well, what the fuck? I don't fully agree with that. Although I will say I hate him a little bit less than I did early on last year. I will say that. I'll admit that, actually. I know Jerome Powell has his reasoning. I actually think, I'll go off on a side tangent here real quick when it comes to our economy and the interest rates. I actually think, to be honest with you, and Cole Ferguson, I know you despise Trump, so you're not going to want to hear this. But the more research I've done on our economy, I actually think the warring sides of Trump versus Powell, they both actually have merit. I think both sides are actually right and wrong. And I actually have concluded ultimately that the reason why both sides are actually right on their philosophies on what should happen and why both sides are actually wrong is because we're in such a massive fucking bubble that it actually doesn't matter. I actually think the bubble's going to pop no matter what happens at this point. And truthfully, it's kind of like a coin toss in all honesty. Genuinely, that is my belief. Early on, I was like, man, this asshole won't lower the interest rates for Trump. Then I really did research into it, and I said, well, Trump actually is not as solid on this as I thought. He might be wrong. But Jerome Powell might be wrong too. That's my conclusion ultimately. We're so fucked right now with our national debts. We're so fucked with this economy and our spending right now that truthfully, when you really study it, you can see a valid argument for both Trump and Powell when it comes to the interest rates. That's my actual stance. And genuinely, it's because we're in such a massive bubble, and we're in multiple bubbles, to be honest with you. And because of that, they could pop at any time. Then we go and we resume money printing right now. We started that back up in December, and it's like, my goodness, it's actually scary. It's actually scary to talk about. So, but that's my actual stance on that, and I don't know if you'll agree, but that's where I'm at with that. I don't hate Jerome Powell as much anymore. Is the bottom line. I see why he believes in his philosophy on the economy the way that he does. I actually genuinely can empathize with him a little bit. 2009 lifeguard, hey, stop everything. Another tariff coming in for $1.99, and he says the goal of the chat is to make the host look good. Thank you, 2009 lifeguard. It's always good to know that there are chatters down there that actually understand what this is about. And yes, it is literally about making me look good. Yes, that is the truth. That's why I do this. I do this on my end to speak for you guys and advocate for America, the best country on earth, filled with the best people on earth. But of course, if I'm going to do that, then yes, you should all be singing my praises constantly. I should literally see nothing in the chat but, my God, you're so smart. How are you right so much? How are you so good looking and smart? I should see all kinds of stuff like that. So you get it, lifeguard. I appreciate that. Seriously. Thank you so much. The tariff train has begun. Yeah, okay. Did I miss something from Eddie? Is that what I'm seeing here? Did I miss a chat from Eddie? Because Eddie does pay 99-cent tariffs sometimes. I'm not seeing one though, but I think bold is a lion as usual. Eddie will come in here and shit talk everyone, and he'll be like, "Man, you guys are cheap," and I actually like it because it goads people into paying their tariffs. And then Eddie will just not pay a tariff, which is fine, by the way. Please only give if you can. In all seriousness, our economy is tough right now. Please, I actually, in all seriousness, as much as I kid, I actually always feel like somewhat guilty when I see you guys super chatting because it's like I assume everyone's like good people living good, honest lives and stuff or doing their best. So please, it would make me feel guilty to know people are giving money that they can't afford to. Please. So only give if you absolutely can. Don't miss any meals. Don't put yourself in a compromised financial situation just to have a super chat pop up. That's the whole thing. Glenn, no refunds. That's why I'm saying only give if you can, because yeah, there's absolutely no refunds on a tariff, obviously. Okay, that money goes straight into my pocket, never to be seen again. All right, like I'm struggling too. If you give money to me, it's mine. It's not going anywhere. But please only do that if you can. That's the warning. Be responsible. All right. So, okay. Yeah, Tulsi will be gone, Sue, says Cole Ferguson. I think she's going to resign. I think she should resign, not because she's doing a bad job, but because it would increase the statement Joe Kent has made about this war. And, I understand what Tulsi's doing here. She is being very professional. So he said, Cole Ferguson says that Hassett clip is appalling. It really is. They're not even trying. This administration's not even trying anymore. They're really not. They're not even trying anymore. Okay, Chad, no refunds or returns. Yeah, no refunds. No refunds on tariffs. Do you think Trump's giving a refund on the tariffs after the Supreme Court said he can't use IEPA laws to do so? He can't use the IEPA method, the International Emergencies Act. You think Trump's going to be like, oh, it looks like we're going to refund the tariffs then? Fuck no. That's our fucking money now. You think Vietnam's getting their money back? No way. So that the same rules apply here. Okay. Eddie says, what's your opinion on gambling, says Eddie. I'm not a big fan of gambling. I'm good. I'm decent. I'm a decent Texas Hold'em player. And to me, that's the most intelligent way to gamble, because you can at least try to control the outcome. But like slot machines are for mindless boomer zombies. Blackjack against the house is idiotic. Blackjack with friends is fun. But gambling is mostly degenerate. Let's be honest here. It's mostly degenerate, and most religions are pretty against it as well. I think it's more important to be smart with your money, And the smartest thing you can do with your money is to pay me in the form of a tariff, obviously. But beyond that, invest your money, save your money, and invest it. Buy assets, buy real estate. If you can. Be smart with your money. It's a gift and it's a tool to be used to increase your life, to benefit yourself, and others. That's fine too. That's why, like I said, the best thing you can do is pay me. But if you're not going to pay me, the next best thing you can do is save it up until you have a good amount, if it's possible to do that, and then invest it. Keep your money. Once you have enough of it, keep it moving. Keep it moving into smart areas, smart investments. Okay, so let me get into Tulsi Gabbard here, though, because we saw the crazy news about Joe Kent yesterday, right? Sick from the Kush says, if you watch a specific sport, responsible gambling is a better investment. Yeah, I understand that too. Yeah, for sure. It's better than slot machines. There's ways to make educated guesses where you can justify the gambling a little bit more. I still caution against it. Sports are unpredictable. Texas Hold'em's unpredictable. I've lost in Texas Hold'em. I've literally lost with like trip aces. Or no, it was trip kings the one time. And I lost. That was the one time I went to a casino. I had triple kings, and I had been bleeding chips on the table all day because chip bullies. The problem with casinos is you get these fuckers that are pretty good at Hold'em, and they'll sit at the table, and they'll get there at like 9 a.m. when the casino opens, and they'll start playing immediately, and they'll build their chips up into this mountainous pile. And then they'll sit there. You get there at like 8 p.m. with friends, and they just have massive amounts of chips. And they just bully you. They go all in on every hand to bully you out of the hand and to bleed your chips dry when you're the big and little blind, right? And this is their strategy. It's so annoying. So you eventually get to a point where I draw trip kings and I'm like, well, fuck, this is my moment. I'm calling them all in. Call them. You have to go all in because they go all in. So you call it. And then I literally lost to the guy next to me who had trip aces. And I went, what the fuck? That's it. I'm never doing this again. I am done. I'm out of here. I am literally out of here. I'm never gambling again. And that was it for me. So you can't control all the outcomes, in all honesty, is the bottom line, with sports or with cards. It's just, there's always an element of chance. That's my take on it. All right, Tulsi Gabbard. So we saw the crazy news with Joe Kent. Brutal. Yeah, it was brutal. Sick. I'd try live poker, but just for fun. Yeah, if you're going for fun, you're going for fun. There's casinos that will let you sit for like $60, so it's not too expensive. You're gonna lose, to be honest with you. Not to be a Debbie Downer, you're gonna fucking lose. But if you're doing it for fun, that's one thing. But make sure you don't get addicted to it because you're gonna lose way more than you win. So back on point here. Enough of the gambling talk. I made one mistake. It's fun to talk about it. I'll never make that mistake again. Bottom line. Joe Kent yesterday, I covered, of course, this is devastating to the MAGA community because they've been trying to deny the reality of this war and of this administration, right? They don't want to talk about the fact that Israel for sure is influencing our government at this point, and it's just so obvious. I've been very clear on this channel. That way there's no confusion if you go back and watch some of my older videos or you go on my X account and you scroll through my older feeds. I was very Israel neutral in the past. Okay, I'll openly say that. I got involved politically. I've always been drawn to politics ever since I was about 12. So on and off, I've been involved politically since then. But I always tried to resist that urge, to be honest with you. It's scary. Politics is a ridiculous thing to be into as a person. There's a wise saying out there, better to be a fisherman than to meddle in the politics of man. And so it's like, I always wanted to ignore that and be like, no, politics is ridiculous. Politics is jester, is what the Gen Zers say. Politics is jester. I got a life that I want to live, you know. I pursued a bunch of dreams in my teens and early 20s and mid 20s even. I was living my own life. But eventually got to a point where I was like, man, this fucking world sucks. America could be so much better. I don't care about politics enough, but politics certainly cares about me. So I created this channel last March, and as a result of that, I've been out of the loop for a while. And I remained Israel neutral as a result. But to be honest with you, it only took a matter of months for me to remember everything that I learned conspiracy theory-wise and to see it all playing out once again and to really just follow the money, the influence, the government actions, etc. And it only took a few months for my eyes to be opened and be like, yeah, you know what? You can't be neutral on that topic. You just can't. It's just so plain as day for anybody that pays attention more than just reading headlines. It's just so plain as day. There's just no denying it. And so I've been Israel neutral up until recently, and a lot of people want to be that way. A lot of people either want to be pro-Israel or Israel neutral. And, you know, at this point, it's like you can't be that way if you care about the America First agenda. That's the bottom line. And what Joe Kent did was essentially force that onto the American public. He's forcing it. He's shifting, I guess you'd call it the Overton window. He shifted it more by making a public statement the way that he did, right? He didn't just resign quietly. He resigned and made a statement where he literally said, we're doing this for Israel, to summarize what he said. That's what he said. And so people are losing their minds over it. Of course, he's being called an anti-Semite. And then, of course, they were like, well, I guess he's going on Tucker Carlson. And then, of course, we literally see Tucker Carlson tweet moments after, I'm having him on my show live tomorrow at 6 p.m. We're going to cover that. I got some clips from that. But that's been huge. And he was in a place of like second command under Tulsi Gabbard. And the reports were that Tulsi Gabbard confided in Joe Kent quite a bit. So these two worked closely, according to the reports that I was reading. Now, Tulsi Gabbard has delivered more of a professional statement. She hasn't really disavowed the Iran war, though we knew her stance on the Iran war before taking this position as our director of national intelligence. And her stance was she's against it. She's been very clearly against it. In fact, I believe I saw an online store she had set up at one point selling T-shirts for the Trump campaign trail, no new war in Iran, I think was what was on the T-shirt. So we know her stance, but now she's being professional about it, and she refuses to publicly disavow it, right? However, she had to go before a Senate hearing today, right? And this wasn't being covered as widely because Iran was bombing Qatar and Saudi Arabia and taking out oil refineries and natural gas reserves. So a lot's been happening. But John Ossoff today, he's a Democrat actually, he questioned Tulsi Gabbard and gave her a line of questioning that, though she answered it as well as she could and as professionally as she could, it forced a realization to further be made when it comes to this war. So I'm going to play that clip right now. I'll have the volume cranked up. You should be able to hear it. I'm not doing screen share today. I'm not streaming from the Streamlabs app. That way, when I actually do end the stream eventually, it's not looping for another hour. But yeah, just take a listen to this. This is the questioning. And pay attention to how she answers it. I'll recap it after it's done playing.
Under the law, you are responsible for providing national intelligence to the president, correct?
Ossoff was on fire
And to the
today,
heads of
Cole
executive
Ferguson. I
branch
agree.
departments and agencies, yes?
Good line of
And
questioning.
to the chairman of the Joint Chiefs and senior military commanders?
Across the IC, yes.
And to the Senate and the House and relevant committees, correct?
Yes.
And the law states that the national intelligence you provide to Congress, quote, should be timely, objective, and independent of political considerations, correct?
Yes.
And you noted in your opening statement you're here fulfilling a statutory responsibility and that your testimony, quote, represents the IC's assessment of threats,
That's right.
correct? That opening statement, as submitted to the committee in advance of this hearing, stated that as a result of last summer's airstrikes, quote, Iran's nuclear enrichment program was obliterated, end quote, correct?
That's right.
And is that in fact the assessment of the intelligence community?
Yes.
So the assessment of the intelligence community is that Iran's nuclear enrichment program was obliterated by last summer's airstrikes.
Yes.
In the opening statement you submitted to the committee last night also stated, quote, there has been no effort since then to try to rebuild their enrichment capability, end quote, correct?
That's right.
And that's the assessment of the intelligence community.
Yes.
The White House stated on March 1st of this year that this war was launched and was, quote, a military campaign to eliminate the imminent nuclear threat posed by the Iranian regime, end quote. That's a statement from the White House. Quote, the imminent nuclear threat posed by the Iranian regime. Was it the assessment of the intelligence community that there was an imminent nuclear threat posed by the Iranian regime?
The intelligence community assessed that Iran maintained the intention to rebuild and to continue to grow their nuclear enrichment capability.
Was it the assessment of the intelligence community that there was a, quote, imminent nuclear threat posed by the Iranian regime, yes or no?
Senator, the only person who can determine what is and is not an imminent threat is the president.
False.
and
This
he
is
made
the
that
worldwide. This is the
determination.
worldwide threats hearing where you present to Congress national intelligence, timely, objective, and independent of political considerations. You've stated today that the intelligence community's assessment is that Iran's nuclear enrichment program was obliterated and that, quote, there have been no efforts since then to try to rebuild their enrichment capability. Was it the intelligence community's assessment that nevertheless, despite this obliteration, there was a, quote, imminent nuclear threat posed by the Iranian regime? Yes or no?
It is not the intelligence community's responsibility to determine what is and is not an imminent threat.
So you can see she's kind of exploiting a loophole here. Obviously, she's not completely wrong. Yes, the president has the final say in determining that. He's the executive branch, the commander-in-chief. So she's sort of right, but she's playing into that and using that ultimately as a loophole and as an excuse to not actually answer the question that's being phrased as a contradiction, rightfully so, by John Ossoff here when it comes to the fact that and I showed this yesterday when I was doing a screen share episode using Streamlabs, the Streamlabs app on my phone. I showed it. I showed a screenshot of Tulsi Gabbard's signed intelligence statement from last February. Let me pull it back up. Last February or last March, and that was well before our summer strikes. And of course, this was obviously done last year before the summer strikes because Trump knew that they were going to possibly strike Iran. So he had the director of national intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, run an assessment on Iran's nuclear facilities. Let me pull that up. Yeah, here it is. So this was, March 26th of last year, 2025. And it says the United States intelligence community continues to assess that Iran is not building a nuclear weapon, and Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei has not authorized the nuclear weapons program that he suspended in 2003. Signed, Tulsi Gabbard. Right? I showed that yesterday because I wanted to point that out even yesterday, that what Joe Kent stated in his resignation statement about how this is happening because of Israel, that does in fact line up with our own intelligence. So the next logical question to ask, which actually Ossoff never got around to asking because his time expired, but if you're a critical thinker, you then have to pose this question very reasonably immediately after to follow it up. If our intelligence was saying, well, they're not building a nuclear weapon, they don't have nuclear warheads. If that's what our intelligence is saying, why did Trump defy it? Right? Trump didn't just decide on a whim to defy it, by the way. I know TDSers out there will say he did. Trump had other alternative intelligence telling him that our intelligence was wrong. That's very likely what the scenario was. Whose intelligence do you think that was, by the way? Where do you think that intelligence came from, suggesting that our intelligence was wrong and should be disregarded? I wonder what country would have provided such information. Do you see why I stated so early on, right away, essentially, in fact, that this would be Iraq 2003 all over again, 2.0, version 2.0? faulty intelligence leading us into a war in the Middle East over weapons of mass destruction that don't exist. Now, that is, of course, if you want to believe the original intelligence assessment by Tulsi Gabbard. Maybe she's the fucking liar here, right? Maybe it's Tulsi Gabbard who can't be trusted. So either you choose to believe United States intelligence, or you choose to accept that perhaps it's foreign countries' intelligence, who have every incentive and reason to get America involved over there, by the way. So you're either choosing our intelligence or you're choosing to believe foreign countries' intelligence over our own. But I choose to believe our intelligence. Because honestly, the logic behind saying that Iran is 2 years away from nuclear warheads, and then repeatedly saying that every 2 years for 47 fucking total years, quite honestly doesn't make sense to me. Where are the nuclear warheads? How has this been an imminent threat? Imminent. The definition of imminent doesn't, to say it's been an imminent threat for 47 years, literally, it actually doesn't make sense definitionally. But here we are, right? And that was very revealing, that line of questioning. It was a great line of questioning. Mad props. He's a Democrat. I don't even care. I don't even care anymore when it comes to the Middle East war. I don't care if we give props and send flowers to Democrats at this point. If they're gonna highlight the contradiction here and the actual problem here, I'm all for it. So you can see Tulsi Gabbard, she handles it as well as she can, but ultimately the contradiction was highlighted here. And there's nothing you can do about it. It's made known. Combine this with what we saw out of Joe Kent's resignation yesterday, and the picture has been painted even more. And hopefully more simple-minded, psyoped Americans can begin at least to start seeing the truth of all of this. And speaking of Kent, he had some stuff to say on Tucker Carlson today. I have a couple of clips pulled up, but I got to be careful because it's Tucker Carlson and he's kind of gay when it comes to reacting to his content. They tend to protect it a little bit more. But this was Joe Kent on Tucker Carlson at 6 p.m. Eastern time today.
Was Iran on the verge of getting a nuclear weapon?
No, they weren't, 3 weeks ago when this started, and they weren't in June either. I mean, the Iranians have had a religious ruling, a fatwa, against actually developing a nuclear weapon since 2004. That's been in place since 2004. That's available in the public sphere. But then also we had no intelligence to indicate that fatwa was being disobeyed or it was on the cusp of being lifted. The Iranian strategy, it's actually pretty pragmatic. The Iranians are obviously aware of what's taking place in their region. And their strategy was to not completely abandon their nuclear program because they saw what happened to Muammar Gaddafi in Libya. When he said, hey, I've got no more nukes, I'll do what you say, I'll give up my nukes.
And we gave him the Nobel Peace Prize?
Yeah, we regime changed him, and he was, executed by his own people in the most horrific way.
Oh, sodomized by a bayonet, right. Okay.
There's no denying it, by the way. That is true. That's exactly what happened to the last guy who claimed that their country didn't have any nukes, that they did what they were requested of. They decommissioned their nuke. They're not a nuclear power anymore. We're willing to play ball now, and we're willing to embrace peace. That is the truth of it. Now, however you may view him, that is what ultimately his fate was. He was literally sodomized by a bayonet. It actually happened on camera. It's pretty dank. And that was his fate. He was regime changed and executed after declaring that his country had no more nukes. So why would any country, objectively speaking, no matter how you feel about the Iranian regime, and again, I'm not an Iran sympathizer on this channel, I'm an American advocate. I actually only care about America. I don't care about Israel or Iran, and I don't sympathize with either country. And I will freely say that I view Islam as a demonic religion. I also just happen to view Israel's religion, Judaism, as an equally demonic religion. Nevertheless, no matter how you feel about it, objectively speaking, why would any country then, after that occurs, being neighbors with Israel, who believes literally openly that from the Nile River to the Euphrates is their manifest destiny to conquer and have control over, why would these countries give up their nukes? It actually doesn't make sense. Or in Iran's case, why would they stop pursuing the development of nukes? Objectively speaking, you do have to ask that question. Now, nevertheless, if you can't answer that question, it doesn't actually matter all that much, because we have our intelligence community members saying, well, they weren't actually pursuing it anyway. That's Joe Kent and Tulsi Gabbard's statements, at least what Tulsi Gabbard was saying March of last year, that they weren't pursuing it. So it's just a bad look all around. Now, Joe Kent would literally go on to say more. I'm going to play a little bit more here. We should be worried that Israel. I agree, bold as a lion. And by the way, bold as a lion, who tried to tell Israel that they weren't allowed to develop nukes? That's a good question to ask, right? When you know what the answer is, it even starts to make a little bit more sense. Who was the last politician publicly to tell Israel no in a major way? JFK. He went for a convertible ride not long after.
So that's the lesson I think that the
a little
entire
loud, sorry.
region took from that
Yeah.
when Hillary Clinton.
Unfortunately, that's what the
Killed.
neocon, neoliberal warmongers, that's the lesson that they showed everyone in the region. And then conversely, the Iranians also knew that if they came out and said, okay, we've got a nuke, whether they were bluffing or not,
Right.
Saddam Hussein, Iraq right next door. So they kind
And
of had
he
this.
hung, I think.
He was hung by his own people, after a bloody, war that's still essentially going on inside of Iraq. So the Iranians' position, when viewed from the lens of the region, was actually fairly pragmatic. They were preventing, themselves from developing a bomb, but they still wanted the ability. They wanted the ability to enrich. They wanted the ability to have some components so that they weren't completely stripped of it. And we always assessed that they were either several months or a year, 2 years away from actually being able to develop a nuclear weapon. And that's not because the Iranians are stupid people. I think we can tell right now that the Iranians are anything but stupid. They had the ability, I think, that the brain power to actually develop one, or they could have simply traded a ton of oil with Pakistan or with someone else to actually get a nuclear weapon. They were not doing that. We had no intelligence to indicate that they were.
Another good point, by the way. Yes, controlling the Strait of Hormuz and all of the essential the trade route for oil. That is what they could have done. That's actually another good point that a lot of people are not factoring in. So that's another one right there. Now, he also had this to say on Tucker Carlson today. This is Joe Kent once again in regards to the topic of the war and why it's happening.
Who's in charge of our policy in the Middle East? Who's in charge of when we decide to go to war or not? In this case, with what the Secretary described, and later on the President, later on the Speaker of the House, and the way the events played out, the Israelis drove the decision to take this action, which we knew would set off a series of events, meaning the Iranians would retaliate. Now, I think there's a potential there where we could have done several different things. We could have simply said to the Israelis, no, you will not. And if you do, then we will take something away from you. I think that it's fine that we offer defense to Israel. But when we're providing the means for their defense, we get to dictate the terms of when they go on the offensive. Otherwise, they stand to lose that relationship. And the Israelis felt emboldened that no matter what they did, no matter what situation they put us in, that they could go ahead and take this action, and we would just have to react.
Super backwards, and he's completely spot on, by the way. Imagine defending a tiny country that literally can't exist without you, yet for some reason they're in charge. They beg you to go to war on their behalf, and when you arrive, they start determining what you're going to do, telling you when to do it. How the fuck does that work? But here we are, by the way, and that is how it works for whatever reason. So it's all ass backwards, and when you combine what Joe Kent is saying with what we saw in the Senate hearing for Tulsi Gabbard today, it's very clear why this is happening, and there is really, truly only one reason. It's not about regime change, technically speaking, though that could benefit them if a soft regime was to rise up, but that doesn't look like it's going to be the case. It certainly wasn't about Persian liberation. It's not even about China. People are saying, well, Trump's playing 5D chess. This is going to hurt China in the future. No, it's never been about China. If it was about China, we wouldn't have pulled some of our THAAD systems out from the Indo-Pacific region that were monitoring China and defending some of our allies from China. We pulled those out to protect Israel, right? So it's not about China, not really, though it might affect China. That's icing on the cake kind of a benefit, I guess. But it wasn't about China. It's not even about oil, actually. It's about Israel, and that's the bottom line. And there's no way around it. And once you see all of it this way, you can't unsee it. So what Joe Kent has done essentially has hopefully helped more Americans come to terms with that reality. And this is just all spiraling out of control to summarize all of this right now. Iran is reacting in ways that clearly this administration didn't account for. I also agree with you, bold as a lion, the Rothschilds. Yeah, because what is one of the last three countries, one of three countries only to exist currently that don't have centralized banking? Iran, I believe, is actually one of the one of the things going on here as well, centralized banking. So yes, exactly. That's another factor here, of course. But this is all spiraling out of control. This administration clearly, I think, at this point is woefully unprepared. They didn't count, and Cuba, so that's 2 down. Yep. So this administration is just woefully unprepared, is the bottom line. And they didn't expect this out of Iran, and we should have never stuck our nose in it to begin with. I said that day one when it happened Saturday morning at around 3 a.m. I went live at 4, and I said that regime change is foolish, and you can't control the outcomes of war. It's always the roll of the dice. Now we're seeing that the die, the set of die, if you're playing like Risk, Global Domination, it's 2 dice. Well, they haven't rolled in our favor, really. And we don't have all the cards because Iran can act any way that it wants because all is fair in love and war. And so Iran is playing it strategically to be objectively fair to them, a lot smarter than this administration seems to have predicted that they would. And it's putting a lot of pressure on Trump. I don't think Trump predicted that NATO would abandon us, though he should have. I don't think he predicted Iran would go scorched earth and strike all of their neighbors, though he should have. And I don't think he predicted that the Strait of Hormuz would remain choked up and locked down, though he should have. He's clearly around bad advisors, and he's clearly not capable of making smart decisions when it comes to war. That's the bottom line. And I think the reason behind all of that is Israel. I think they told him this needs to happen, and I think it's likely that in some way, shape, or form, Trump owes Israel something, probably based off of the election results of November 2024. That's a conspiracy, though. Can't prove that one. So that's what I wanted to come on here and say tonight. That's really what we're dealing with right now. I'll, of course, be going live again tomorrow. I'm sure there will be more news. And we'll just have to see how this unfolds. Midterms are coming up, and it's not looking good. Now the Senate is at jeopardy of turning blue this year, according to Kalshi betting markets. So it is absolutely crazy what we're dealing with. And I can't remember. I think this is day 18 now coming to a conclusion. So we're approaching fast the 3-week mark, and Trump promised us 4 to 5 weeks at most. We'll see how that unfolds. Anyways, thank you all for tuning in today. I appreciate all of my various super chatters. Sick from the Kush, Bold as a Lion, Beck Fan, Glenn, 2009 Lifeguard. I appreciate all of you guys. I think that was all of my super chatters. Thank you so much for paying your tariffs. And thank you for all of the chatters, the viewers. Be sure to like the stream if you haven't already. Subscribe to American Advocates for more content like this. And when you do, make sure post notifications are turned on so you're notified every single time I go live. I've been trying to go live earlier, though this one wound up being late because of all the news. But expect me to start going live at around 7 p.m. Or 7:30 p.m. most nights now. Days are getting brighter. My sleep schedule is being restored. So I'm actually waking up earlier now, which means I don't like staying up as late. So... glory to America. God bless the USA. God bless all of you. Have a great rest of your evening. Take care.